welcome back to another episode of That CBD Girl podcast. Today we have a guest on our show that I'm really excited to introduce to you guys. We'll be discussing her journey overcoming breast cancer and her amazing story, so really excited to introduce her. And remember guys, this podcast is brought to you by Quartz Trading Co. CBD and Think Natural and Choose CBD. As a courtesy disclaimer, please note that the FDA does not test or approve CBD for medical use, and statements made on this podcast are not intended to treat, cure, or diagnose any illness or disease. So today I'm here with my friend Jamie, who I met on Instagram, and our relationship began through my company. She used my bath bombs during her chemo treatments, and I think our first conversation was probably talking about how you like to use them through the chemo treatments, right?
Right, yeah, I loved them. They really are amazing for the bone pain and joints and just the all over body ache.
Yeah, nice. Well, we got to talking, and I think that she has a really cool story. So I thought today we would talk about her journey with cannabis and how she's used it to help her. So, Jamie, do you want to start by just kind of sharing, like, when you first heard about cannabis and what your experience was then?
So, I think my first acknowledgement of learning of cannabis was probably in the DARE program in school.
Oh, how funny.
But I was actually exposed to it earlier in my childhood, visiting my grandpa in Oregon. I remember standing on the porch of his house and seeing my brother and cousin off in his barn and like running out to see what they were doing in the barn, and they're in there laughing, and I'm like, what are you guys laughing about? Like, what are these plants? And they're just tomato plants, and they just laugh, and I'm like, why the hell are you in here with the tomato plants? And like I ran off and found something else to do, but like later on finding out like what cannabis was, and like, oh, okay, like, what's Grandpa really doing?
Right.
And, yeah, it's crazy to think that, and then being scared to smoke it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about the DARE program, because I think I could relate. I don't think I really, like, knew or heard the word, or maybe heard the words, but, like, knew what it was until then. It's almost like it does the opposite. Like, it teaches you what drugs are.
Right. No, and like I was so paranoid. Like I was that kid, like growing up, so paranoid that like even if I try it one time, I was gonna be the one that died from it. So like,
yeah,
and even in high school, like I don't know. I think maybe figuring out that my grandpa grew it, and like hearing stories, like my mom telling me that like they smoked weed and when they were growing up, and that my dad smoked it and stuff. So
yeah, I
think maybe that made me feel like okay with trying it. Because that was the only thing I experimented with in high school. Everything else, like when my friends were doing ecstasy and going to parties and stuff, I was always the mom taking care of them. Like,
yeah,
they were petting the fish tank because it's so beautiful, and I'm like, okay, let's go sit down over here. Like,
yeah, I grew up with a mom who came from or struggled a lot with addiction. So I think like for me, I was always just worried about getting addicted. Like everything you can get addicted to. If you try it once, you're gonna get addicted.
Right.
So I think I was like, I don't know, more afraid to try things like that. But that was like the only thing that I experimented with in high school too.
Yeah, because I remember my mom telling me too that my uncle got kicked out from my grandparents' house when he was in high school, and he moved in with my parents or something. I think when my brother was a baby because of him smoking weed and stuff, and they were like totally against it. So it was like growing up, like part of my family was super conservative and against it, and then my other part was like growing it and selling it on the black market. Like,
but then you just see like these negative things happen from it.
I saw the negative, and so I was like, okay, I'll stay away from it. And then my freshman year of high school, like there was a guy that I believe he was a senior when I was a freshman. And I would be walking to school, and he'd sit outside the freaking Pizza Hut, sit out there on the sidewalk, and he'd smoke a bowl before he'd walk over to school. We went to North High, so the Pizza Hut, like if you know,
funny.
He'd be sitting there, so I'd go and like I'd just sit down with him, and like we'd just talk. And I wasn't even smoking it then. Like I would just sit there with him and like listen to him tell me stories, and just like like, we would have those deep conversations, like, about life, and it wasn't just, like, we're stoners, like, hey.
I was always accused of being a stoner. But I was never. How old were you when you first used it?
15.
15? Right. And then did you, like, use it often throughout high school, or did you stop?
I remember the first time I smoked it, it was that same friend. He was in a band, and it was the lead singer of the band basically was the dealer, and he and I became friends, and he gave me some, and I remember in my room, like, he was telling me, like, this is how you gotta do it. You smoke it, and you get a bottle, and you blow the smoke into the bottle and put the lid on real quick, and it won't smell in your room. Your mom will never know that you smoked weed.
Oh, how funny.
Okay.
We always did the steamrollers.
So, that was my first time smoking it. That was, maybe I smoked it before, but that was the first time I actually got high, and I was waiting for I would have my friend's uncle. He would pick us all up and take us to school. I was so paranoid that first time that he wasn't going to pick me up that I was like, I grabbed my backpack and I walked to school. And I remember sitting in my first period class just, like, looking everywhere, like, my foot was tapping, like, so I'm pretty sure that was a sativa I smoked, but, like, I was super paranoid, like, just my whole class, and then I'm, like, having cotton mouth, and, like, that was that experience, and I didn't open my mind to it again until when I started business school in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was because it had just been voted recreationally legal, and everybody in the school, like, that opened up the conversation to talk about it more. And we had some kids in school that would, they would go to their lunch break, they would smoke and come back, and they would walk by us, and we're like, oh, we know what they did. And there was even one class that my friend was like, we just started laughing hysterically, like, and we're like, oh, we got contact high. Don't think we did, but I think we were just delirious from school. But it was just like we laughed like we got contact high, but we had a couple classmates that would talk about how one girl in particular would make edibles for her family members that had lots of body pain and joint pain.
Is this the one that you were telling me that she didn't tell them?
Yeah. Yeah, no, she was like, and she was super, like, loud and vocal about it. Like, I loved her personality.
That
she
is
was
so
like,
funny, though, that she didn't tell them.
Yeah, like,
they're like, we feel really good.
Yeah, making them cookies. Oh, just eat another cookie. I'm like, okay, I need to try one of your cookies or cupcakes next time you make them. And she's like, really? I was like, yeah, next time you make some, bring me one. And so she brought me one to school, and I remember eating half of it the first time, and, like, right before I went to bed. Or, no, maybe, like, probably 30 or 40 minutes before I went to bed. Like, before it even kicked in, I just went to sleep. Like,
yeah.
Thinking, oh, I'm going to sleep great tonight.
Knocked you out.
No, I don't know what it happened. Like, I had dreams that night that were, like, I said that they were like a kaleidoscope. Like, it just, like, everything kind of, like, was blending together, but it was like, I was looking
like
through
an
a kaleidoscope.
trip.
Yeah. Like, whoa.
That was some heavy stuff,
right?
man.
But, like, I had recently found out that my boyfriend smoked, and he was like, oh, well, we'll get you something from the dispensary. Like, get you a good edible, and we'll try it that way. I'm like, okay. So the next day, like, we went and got one, and we went to visit his friend up in Kernville, and I ate, like, a quarter of it, and, like, he's like, let's see how you do with that quarter. Like, give it 30, 45 minutes. I'm like, okay. And so we're sitting there visiting with his friend, and end up, okay, we're gonna go explore, do what we do. Like, we get in the car and we drive in the mountains and take pictures, and that's our weekend getaway. But we're driving down the road, and he's like, are you feeling it yet? I'm like, no. He's like, really? He's like, well, go ahead and eat the other quarter, like, piece of it. I'm like, okay. So by now I've eaten half of one of those little brownies, but probably 15 minutes or so after eating the brownie, I start feeling the first quarter. And I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel it now. And he's like, that's not that second piece that you ate. That's the first one kicking in. And he was like, now we know you have a slow metabolism, and
Yeah.
basically. Next thing I know, we're in a sandwich shop ordering sandwiches, and I'm like, whoa. Like, then the second part kicked in, and I'm really high then, and like people walking by me, like they had tracers on them. I'm just like standing there.
A minute feels like 2 hours.
Right, and like I have that stoner primer grin, and I'm just like, oh, like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But, and then I think not too long after that, we got in the car and I passed out.
Nice.
And that was a lot of how my first year of it was. Like, I'd eat an edible or even smoke, and I'd pass out right after.
Yeah.
But
And had you heard about CBD at the time, or you were just kind of experimenting
just experimenting
with cannabis recreationally?
Yeah, just recreationally, just because I hadn't tried it since high school. I'm like, let me see now that I'm older and like I'm a little bit more mature, and let me see like how I handle it now. So that was my whole experimenting with it again, like recreationally. But it was,
and that was 2016.
It was in 2016.
Beginning or end?
It was towards the end of 2016.
Okay. And then come 2017.
Come 2017, in June, my boyfriend and I just moved in together, but prior to moving in, I had found a lump in my breast when taking a shower, but I hadn't told him yet because he was dealing with a lot of stress with his job, and then finding out his dad had cancer. And I'm like, I don't want to bring it up because it could be one of those, like, just hormonal thing, normal. So I didn't bring it up until after we were living together. After the first week we moved in, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have a doctor's appointment, then I'm going to school, I'll be home after. He's like, okay, whatever. That night I get home, he said, how'd your doctor's appointment go? I'm like, oh, I just got a referral for another appointment. Like, trying to blow it off, no big deal, again. And he's like, why? I'm like, because I have a lump.
Yeah.
But, like, he was super awesome. Like, I was so scared to tell him, like, what's going to happen. But
it's just so scary all around.
Yeah, no, he was awesome. He was like, oh, shit. But, like, he hugged me, and that was the first night he told me he loved me.
Aw.
I cried. Oh, that's exactly what I needed in that moment. Like, to know that, like, he loved me and that he wasn't going anywhere. He told me, worst case scenario, you lose a boob. So that was
you
the
can
mentality.
Always get a new
like,
one.
He basically was like, and then that became my mentality. It was like, I always wanted a boob job. Like, now I'm got one. But yeah, he was awesome about that, and I think it was prior to even getting the diagnosis that's what it was. I was just going through all the testing. Like, I had the ultrasound and biopsy of it, but I was at work one day and he texted me. He's like, I think we really need to look into CBD. I'm like, what's CBD? And I was at work in my job. I was working at the business school I was going to. I worked in their career services center, and that was like the easy college job where you just sit at the desk and basically you can be on the internet all day. So I'm at work looking at CBD and reading about it, and that was my rabbit hole into the cannabis world that, like, I've now become mesmerized with, where instead of really researching the different breast cancers and how bad it could be, I went into the direction of cannabis and how it actually works with our body, that it heals us. And my sister-in-law told me recently, not everybody's a freak, or not a freak, or maybe it was a freak about it like you, like, is obsessed with it. Oh, because
you were, like, super passionate about it.
Yeah, because I was like, have you guys watched Weed the People yet?
Yeah.
And she's like, not everybody's obsessed like you. I'm like, yeah, but still, like, come on, like,
it's right in front of us. Like,
right?
Look at this stuff.
Like, I had already made it through my cancer, and they were dealing with taking my niece, and she has been diagnosed with a gene mutation that she